I guess it went over late. Meeting in order. I'll have a pledge or the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ready for roll call.
Supervisor Bowser.
Here.
I'm here. Treasurer Kowalski.
Here.
Trustee Woods.
Here.
Trustee Wright.
Here.
5 present, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay. I don't have to read this meeting notice, do I?
No.
All right. We'll open it up to audience comments on agenda items. Barry?
All right, Barry Wayne Adams, coming over from Marshall, Michigan, just to see what you guys are up to. Evidently, the elephant in the room is agenda item 2. There shouldn't be much controversy. I mean, this is supposedly a country that operates on the law of contract. And this agreement is a contract, and you know, there are various words for types of contracts, but an agreement is a contract. And they're in a contract, each party is liable to perform to the terms and conditions as stated in the contract. And if you don't do that, it's breach of contract. And in this particular contract, the rigidity of that enforcement is explicitly set forth in the paragraph on modification of agreement. No waiver, alteration, or modification of any of the provisions of this agreement shall be binding unless in writing and signed by a duly authorized representative of both parties to this agreement. So you got to do what's in here. If you don't do it, you got to do what's they call a novation of contract. You reconfigure the terms of the contract, which has not apparently happened here. And there seems to have been a deviation in performance from the non-fictional party. And again, that's that sort of thing. The breach of contract is actionable. I think there's actually a provision in the criminal code about negligence of duty kind of thing. But lackadaisical adherence to what you agree to seems to have become prevalent in the county, where it's the standard trick of many people who are not upright to enter into a contract, set forth terms, agree to them. You do your part, you come through on your end, and then suddenly there's a whole bunch of reasons why the other party is not able to come through. And the most egregious example of that was the failure of the Marshall City Council to follow the recommendation of the Joint Planning Commission, which was a breach of contract. So I think people vote, when they vote for people, they want to vote for people who will make solidly binding contracts and have enough sensibility to hire people who are capable of adhering to those contracts. And when that doesn't happen, then evidently the tree has to be shaken and see where the fruit falls. So I'd whistle for the rest of my 5 minutes, but I guess I've said enough.
Thank you.
Lee?
Glancing through this, it said the hours of the work were Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I thought Thursday was included in, is this a new contract?
Yes.
Did that have Thursday in it? I just glanced through, saw somewhere that the level of pay was the 3 days a week, like over $45 an hour. Those are my tax dollars. I'm not really happy with that amount per hour. That's kind of crazy. Of course, I worked 25 years as a teacher, a lot less than that, and a lot hard work, but fun work. But so we're just going to do 3 days a week. I just can't see that we could spend our tax dollars, my money, for that rate of pay. That's just, I think, not reasonable. And if it is going to be 3 days a week, then I think there should be some reconsideration on how much money we're doling out of our pockets for that. That was my main comment. Then I was just going to say, I noticed that the Ford mess is not adversely affecting the traffic flow, as we all know, but I did have a hard time getting in here. And so, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public audience comment at this time. And we'll go to the special order of business and review of the Township Government insurance coverage by Jason Orton.
So Dave, I'd like to make a motion that we reorder the special order of business to bring the agreement with the manager ahead of the insurance. Originally, this was to be a workshop on insurance only, but since you changed the content, I think for the sake of the public, who's probably more interested in the office manager than they are our insurance policy, I'd make a motion that we consider changing the order of our special order of business to bring the office manager issue first.
I'll second that motion, because I do think that most of the people here are here for that reason. And also based off of the people who made comments that was on that item and not the insurance item.
And Jason just motioned to me that he's all right.
He's okay with that?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same.
Aye.
Okay, at this time, we'll go to number 2. Consideration of approving the employment agreement, job description for the office manager attached. Yes.
There is a suggestion from our attorney to add some additional language to propose termination provision. passed out to the board members earlier. At this time, I would like to move the approval of the proposed agreement with the additional language and the termination provision as recommended by the attorney.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Open it up for discussion.
I would just like to point out that there has been no, it was kind of alluded to earlier in some comments made. This agreement is not currently in effect, and there has been no employment agreement between the township and Mr. Fowler. So this would be the first such written agreement between them. It has been reviewed by the attorney who, with that addition to the termination section, has approved the form of the proposed agreement. This would add some from the current status of Mr. Fowler's employment. This would add some additional duties, which he has been performing, I believe. I'll defer to Wayne on that because Wayne worked more on the actual job description. But there are some additional duties in there, and it would have the effect of taking the place of any prior action that the board has taken with regard to Mr. Fowler's employment. And it, in essence, would keep his salary the same as it as currently, and would not include the increase that was proposed earlier this year.
I'll talk, maybe, can I just say about what the job description, how that came about and what we did?
Yeah.
So, as was known by the board, Dave asked me to go through the job description. Him and I, we sat down, went through it. We went, with, Carl as well, but before that, we got insights from Glenn's email that he had sent about what he needed in terms of receiving and receiving monies from the township. And so we made sure that language in there reflected that, so there would be a good handoff of the monies from Carl to Glenn via the safe. And then Joanna Johnson on the Planning Commission was very helpful as well in expressing some of the needs from the Planning Commission side, specifically about making sure that we get things onto the website and making sure that those things were there. So we added language around that, as well as this board approved MailChimp, which would be our mass notification system to the township residents. And so that's something that's new. And Dave and I talked about that, and we talked with Carl, and he's open to doing that with some training with that to help out and assist with those things. So there's been some language in there. I took those items here after we made it. I will say also, other big things that changed was the reporting to structure. There was multiple people that Carl was reporting to. And so we took that to just one person, the township clerk, one role that would be reporting there. So that there's not multiple voices. In the absence of the clerk, it would be then the supervisor who Carl would take directions from. And so we changed the language there to represent that. And so then when we went to Carl, we looked at it and said, how does this reflect what he's doing in those other provisions? And we sat down and talked about it. Because he had not had like a signed contract before, it just like in any job situation, there is a little bit of talking about agreement on what the language looks like. So that language, we ironed out some of that language, and this is how we got to the job description that we have today. So we have the job description, and then there's the piece that Jeff talked about in terms of what the law firm said in terms of that wording. And so that kind of got absorbed within those two documents. But I do have questions about that, but I'll just wanted to put full transparency. How did this job description come about? I wanted to have full transparency so people understood what things went into why those changes happened. So,
I mean, just a question. So I think you mentioned the Survey Monkey, I think it was.
Yeah.
Which line item is that?
yeah, that is on, we should have numbered these. 6. It's the last sentence. It says assist with the mass notification system. It's the very last sentence. It says provide information. So this is referring to, it says provide information via telephone, email, and at the counter to the public on various township services and related matter, and assist with the mass notification system.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I guess I can say a few things. First of all, I think maybe what people are referring to is on August 16th, 2023, the board approved hiring Carl. And I guess I want to preface my comments. My comments are specifically around the role, not who's in the role, but the issue I see is that this is a contract, and we need to consider it as a contract. So the board in 2023, whether they consider it a contract or not, set forth a job description, which we've been dealing with, qualifications, and then hours, 8:45 to 3:30, Monday through Thursday. So I guess what maybe Jeff you're saying is it wasn't a contract. As it turned out, even though the board approved this, it was never followed through. The Thursday was never realized, which I think is part of the concern possibly on compensation, because if a board approves something based on a 4-day work week, one would assume they would take into account the number of hours worked. At least I would. I can't speak for the past board, but as I pointed out before, it makes a big difference, right? It's again, regardless of who's only in the role, it makes a big difference. It has an impact. I just want to point that out because I think that's maybe what people are referring to, because it's come up in the last couple of meetings. I guess the only other point I'd make is that Wayne, I think I knew that you were working on it because you told me. I don't think that was an assignment or something that was discussed publicly. It seems like if we're going to do things, that we ought to publicly announce them as a board. I appreciate the effort that you put into it. As far as a legal review, I spent most of the day on the phone today as our lawyers are back in the office. There seems to be a lot of disagreement on language. They didn't create this document. They don't really know where it came from. It was given to them. I don't think this edition actually conflicts with other language in terms of, I'll say, termination of contract or how the township or the employee leave the position. and I can go on and on. I mean, there's something, it references provision F. I have no idea what provision F is. It talks about hours, but then it lists 19.5 hours. Well, it's actually 20.25 hours. It talks about effective date of July 1. Well, today is July 15th. It talks about I guess it's the effective date, I think was some of the highlighting got changed. And so I think the title of it was effective date, performance review and modification. It says that parties agree. I don't know who the parties are. One area that I have a lot of problem with is the conflict in the document between who's doing what. In other words, there's a section on supervision. It says the township supervisor or his designee shall be responsible for the overall supervision of the services and job performance of Carl Fowler and the performance of services provided under the terms of this agreement with daily supervision as per the job description. Okay, Dave, you're never in the office. I don't know how you're gonna do that. I guess I'd be interested in knowing how you're gonna supervise an employee when you're not here. I think most companies, would be my reference point, because I've worked at a few companies, essentially you offer a position to an employee, or I'm sorry, a candidate, and you describe that position the best you can, and maybe there's classifications. And if the employee likes what they see, they sign the agreement. And then in terms of how jobs are assigned and how performance is evaluated, there's an overall policy that deals with that. That might say something like, you have quarterly reviews with your supervisor or manager, as the case may be. You have annual performance appraisals that are usually tied to salary adjustments. I don't know why. I think maybe one of the notes I saw was that this was a takeoff on our zoning administrator's contract. I don't know why we have to have contracts. It would seem to me that if we're gonna have individual contracts with individual employees, we're just creating a rat's nest of documentation that we already know is a problem for the township. I mean, we can't even find documents that we want to find. So I guess from my perspective, this is nowhere near ready for approval. It has serious flaws in it, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Is there just to make it usable, Glenn, or is there anything? I'm just curious. I'm trying to, so you highlighted the supervision part, kind of. It has mixed messages with what the job description says. I'm trying to figure out what language, that you would maybe see.
Yeah, so I think in that particular topic, the conflict is, right, it says supervisor is going to be responsible, but then in another section, it talks about the clerk. And I think that doesn't make sense to me. And then I'll say another point. We have to remember that statutory duties are assigned to the roles that we play. So as treasurer, I'm assigned statutory roles, right? If the board says, hey, Glenn, we'd like you to sweep the floors once a week as treasurer, I can say no, right? And the clerk can say no to anything that's not statutory. my concern is if the board, what I would like to see is us get to as an organization of having not only a job description, but an ebb and flow of an office manager, if you think about it in its fullest terms, is running the office. And it's a great role for us to have, and it's a great position to have. But it has to, in my mind, it has to be a complete role, and we have to be communicating with the employee, which is difficult for a board to do. So a suggestion that might be there is that, Jeff is the clerk, but he doesn't have to do anything as the clerk relative to supervise anyone. We do have a budget officer. We pay $800 a month for several items, including, I think, the FOIA, budget officer, and I'm probably forgetting some other things. So it could actually be the budget officer, so that interaction between the board and whoever that person giving direction is something that the board can designate rather than it just leaving it open. So for example, maybe without getting into gross detail, what are the assignments for the next month, and how did that work out for the past month? I mean, those are very common practices in private corporations. Monthly report is a typical term where you say, hey, this is what I'm planning to do, and this is what I did. And the board could kind of look at that and maybe work through this representative to say, okay, this is what, we'd like to do. We're not going to micromanage, but whether it's the maintenance of the building, or it's records within the building, what is it we're working on? In addition to obviously the permitting, which I think somebody did a study and said we average one permit a working day. So it's obviously not a huge role. I'm not diminishing the role. It's an important role to take the applications. But we've taken away some of the work, right? We've said, well, we're not, or I guess maybe, I don't know if we took it away or it was not accepted by the employee. So we've diminished the amount of work rather than increasing it. I made a resolution that basically mimicked what, the position in my mind was already doing. The board decided to vote against that. I would point out that I am responsible for the monies within the township. And so by you removing me from direction, you're removing. So if there is an issue with money, I don't want to have to work through a second person to get that corrected. As far as I'm concerned, it's worked very well so far. I'm not aware of any issues where we couldn't work things out, but we have issues, right? Sometimes we get ACH transfers on taxes after we can accept them, and we have to work through these things. And so I take it, I personally, if we're going to handle money, I need to be in the loop. By statute, I need to be in the loop.
I think that, like, I mean, just like in every work situation, as you kind of describe it, like, it doesn't mean that you have no interactions with Carl. I think for sure, like, have it. I just think in terms of like who he reports to is what we're kind of saying is in terms of that. I mean, I have lots of coworkers as well, and we communicate and say, hey, can you take on this? Or, what is your capacity? So I don't think that there can't be communications, but I think in terms of giving direction, I think it was easier for us to say, like, it, coming from one person and
What
that.
made it easier?
Well,
I've heard this many times
Okay.
and I've never heard one example of that. What made it easier?
What makes it, do you find, let me ask you, in your work situation, did you have multiple direct bosses that you reported to? You had your boss's boss, but you had your boss, and that's who you reported to.
Correct. I also worked for a lot of companies where I had cross reporting. I still had a primary, I'll say, president or manager, but I also had maybe a program manager.
Yeah.
Who I reported to. And they both, had input into, but you didn't answer my question. I asked you a question, and you asked me a question.
Right, but I'm
I'd like
just
an
saying like
answer to
that,
my question.
the answer to your question, I don't have an exact example off the top of my head at this. But I'm just saying, I think that,
Or maybe somebody else does. I don't
yeah,
know.
maybe, if anyone wants to help me
I
out.
don't think if there was a money problem, I don't think you'd have to work through it with Carl. That's all there is to it. I mean, if if there's something misplaced or something, it's just got to go that way. So you got to be able to talk to him. So, yeah.
Well, I think, on that particular bullet point, what was it, number 5, receiving and receipt of other township payments? You could extend that duty to resolve discrepancies, to add resolve discrepancies with the treasurer if they arise. That would spell out an additional duty that,
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, actually, the lawyers have suggested some language there. So there again, I think, again, this is my perspective. We've been talking about this for a long time, but we haven't been making much progress. And I think part of the reason is our approach. We can't just take an approach where all of a sudden somebody starts working on something and then somebody else picks it up and turns it into a contract and then throws it over to the lawyer and says, hey, what do you guys think of this? We ought to look at this as a holistic document and maybe put it in front of the lawyers if that's what you guys want. To me, again, I look at it in the real world as you make an offer to an employee and they either accept it or they don't accept it, right?
There's negotiation, so like,
There's negotiation, absolutely. Like, you could offer me a job and I could say, well, it's not enough pay. And sometimes that depends on the employee, right? Whether you're how interested, what the market is, there's all kinds of, but you're right. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation of that and the job itself. What is the job? Well, I don't really want to do that, or I like that, or whatever.
can I bring up another thing, just that because I didn't get the full agreement until right before having to present it to Carl. On the one thing, and Joanna and I talked at length about this the other day. But we talked about in the compensation section, it gives the numbers. And so I was wondering, why did we put those numbers in this contract versus the salary schedule? Because those numbers, like, we did some math, we were doing the mathing. And that followed the salary schedule of the base pay of what the office manager position is, along with the permit officer duties, right? But then this kind of lumps those two things together, which this job description just says office manager. It didn't say office manager and permit officer. And so we were just wondering, why was it important to put that number there versus the saying, like, see the salary schedule as per that original agreement was a big question. And I didn't get a chance to ask that. Sorry, Jeff.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
usually the compensations in the agreement as well, we tried to follow.
Okay.
But the salary has always been the total amount.
Yeah.
And that was the compensation, and that was done when we developed this new schedule for this budget, we showed the budget centers to which it's charged. And so that's why it's separated out. It's, for example, on my salary, mine's divided between the clerk and the elections. It's all one salary by the law. It's one salary, but it's divided between those two budget centers. So that's what the schedule shows, is which budget centers it's done, but the salary is the whole thing.
So I just want to make sure, because I mean, this question was posed to me and I didn't have an answer at the time. And so like, Carl had other duties as well. He had at the time deputy treasurer as well on that. And he chose to not do those things, right? And that was his prerogative in that regard. But if he were to like, I'm not doing permits anymore, the question was, would that be adjusted then with what his salary, or would this then be just for the office manager position?
That's part of his job.
Okay.
So it would be either, if you're not gonna do the permits anymore, then you're not doing the job anymore of office manager, or whatever the board does at that particular time. There's, it's one of the subtle little differences in public employment versus private employment. And for right or for wrong, there are a lot of different rules for public employment and how you deal with public employees as opposed to private sector employees. Quite frankly, some of them don't make much sense, but those are the rules.
What are some of those?
I'm not gonna sit up here and take up everybody's time by going through that, and I wasn't.
I just asked a question. You could
Yeah,
just
I
say-
wasn't, and I'm trying to give an answer, but you're interrupting.
No, I didn't interrupt. Okay.
I didn't hear about any of this till last Thursday. And I'm fine that it was going on because I think it's been needed. But, to follow up on Glenn, it would be nice to at least be aware that the initiative was ongoing, so we could clear this thing up, because it has been, a thorn of our side for a
Right.
while. One of my questions is, is a contract, what are we trying to accomplish having a contract? Is this a contract just for Carl being in this position? Or is this going to be my second question, follow-up? Is this office manager going to be a long-term position within the township? I understand the reasoning why we initiated the position back in August of 23, but looking down the road further, is this going to be an active position as we head off into the future with the township?
I think it will be, because we need to have somebody in the office. At one time when Cindy Sink was here, she was here every day. And then we had our road administrator, he was here. And so then we hired Carl to fill in for that. But I think it's important that we have this position, so.
Okay, and I just wanted to get a little bit of background heading forward. I know why we created the position, because we needed somebody.
Right.
Stuff was just going on like crazy. And
Were you going to respond to that?
Well,
I didn't want to interrupt.
oh, go ahead.
wanted to-
I got something else, but go
I
ahead.
just want to say that that's kind of a decision. I mean, the board could make at any time, is how it wants to staff, if at all, the offices. There's no requirement, except there are requirements when the treasurer collects taxes. And actually, it's interesting because there's only really 3 days that are required for the treasurer to be in an office, or his deputy, or someone assigned by the treasurer. And the clerk is required to be in the office, or have someone in the office at certain times during elections, to do certain particular act, but there's nothing else that requires township offices to be open. Actually, but for a number of years, we've always felt that it would be, behoove us to do that. It used to be the permit officer. There was a permit officer, a zoning administrator permit officer who, you know, who did things by appointment. And would either meet with a person down here or would meet them at their place of business or their residence, et cetera. So I think it depends on how the board at any given time, usually during budget time, would see what the needs are and what the requirements are, how they best can be provided to the citizens of the township. So that would be a decision irrespective of any agreement. If we decided as a board tomorrow, or today, that we won't have an office manager position, that we'll just have, a secretary or a clerical person to sit out there and take messages, then we could do that. And even if there was an agreement, I see the agreement as being protection for both the employee so that they understand what they're entitled to and also to the township on how they're going to manage that employee and how they're going to do the duty. Do we have to have one? No.
I will say that similar to you, Jeff, in that sense of having it where he signs an agreement, I think that is a benefit for both Carl and for us. From that perspective, I think that, like I said, some of the language that Glenn is pointing out, I think is a bit confusing where we need to align that. For sure, but I think that it's not uncommon practice to do that. I just want to make sure that the language makes sense and it, like, as like I said, when I talked to Joanna and other residents, like the concerns of like making sure that the board is protected if we need to take action on something that we have that within our ability to do so. I think those are important things, but I think it is a benefit because it's like Carl's invested in the contract, we're invested in the contract. So I think that could be a benefit, but I'm open to hearing other ideas too.
No, I just wanted perspective is what I was looking for.
Mhm.
Know the backstory and history and reasonings behind where we haven't been working on a contract. Now we're pushing forward with one. I'm just trying to get a perspective on the benefit.
Yeah, I think that's a really great observation. It's maybe beyond the scope of today, but to your point, if you go back in time, the township has handled, I'll say the front office various ways. I mean, I can point you back to the time when Cindy Sink had, I think, Monday and Wednesday, and Susan George had Tuesday and Thursday. Now, how they were compensated, I have no idea because I wasn't on the board at the time and I probably didn't dig for that level of detail. I think at one time, I want to say Nikki, who was a deputy treasurer, was off some sort of an office manager, or she was doing some role. It seemed like Paul Anderson was in the office maybe every time I came in. I don't know what his role, but to your point, it could be instructive to kind of go back and piece together how we have functioned, because it's a model, right? But other townships handle that role differently. For example, Convis, the clerk and the treasurer are in on Mondays and Wednesdays. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the only way to do it, for sure. I can tell you that the treasurer is compensated significantly more than I am. So people, I think, have to take into account those types of things. I think the clerk is about the same the same salary. But I think it's a great observation.
I just to bring up another point that you brought up of just not knowing and, you know, I don't think that was the intent. I know that residents had said that, you know, like, we're still talking about Carl, you know, and I think Dave's, and hopefully I'm not speaking for you on this, but you wanted to bring some resolution to this.
That's why I got a hold of you and I said, you know, we're both kind of on the outside of it and let's work through some stuff. And we'd had the special meeting in May. And I said, let's go back to that. And then there's some things we can add. And then we had some input from like Joanna and different people. And that's when we came up with this. We're trying to hide anything.
Oh, I wasn't implicated.
No, I didn't,
Yeah.
you know, and if you are, that's fine. I'm not.
No.
I just, I would like to get resolution to this and move forward with it and if we can put it behind us and go forward.
And part of me also like, you know, when I would like to see us move on to other discussion points. There's other things that we need to as a board to get to, and we've been piddling on this for a while. So I think we owe it to residents to kind of get this somewhat resolved to do it. But I do agree that we may need to make some modifications to it. But
Just in that vein, thank you.
Yeah.
So I love segues.
Segue, there you go.
In the principal duties and responsibilities, I think maybe in addition to building maintenance, just noticing building maintenance issues, interior and exterior, or something like that, grounds maintenance.
What does that mean and what does that entail? So I'm just curious, like, is that, you're saying that
Just-
Carl should do it or he should
Yeah,
notice them?
underneath the office manager, because I'm not sure, you know, everybody else, I know Jeff's been involved in those types of duties, but they're not a statutory duty. It's just something that's fallen to him through time. Is it something that we can put under an office manager because he's here more often? Or that position would be here more often?
Is it like
it would-
reporting? Or is it like, I'm just trying to understand,
I
is it
can
like
think-
reporting?
Noticing and reporting.
I would think that, yeah, it'd be more noticing and reporting.
Noticing and reporting.
Just, if there's anything that he sees that needs to be taken care of to let us know.
Yeah.
So an example, we could use examples, right? Because it usually is helpful, right? So we had a bunch of stuff ripped off the wall over here for months since the last election, maybe November or something, and it just sat there. Okay. Right or wrong, one day I asked Carl if he would go out and get quotes to have it repaired because it hadn't happened for a long time, and he did a great job. He went out and he surveyed and we picked Alfrey, I think, as a board. I was a little unsure exactly what we had to do there because it was, I think, literally $200, you know, so it wasn't a lot of money. The roof is another example where, you know, I kept bringing in shingles and laying them on the credenza in there. Okay. I think eventually, I'm not sure who got the quotes, maybe Jeff got them. I don't know who got quotes, but those are the kinds of things that I think it can be, you know, again, an office manager, to your point, could be managing that. I don't think there's any harm in spending the time getting quotations for the board to review. Even potentially on their own, or it could be part of this monthly, hey, I'd like to look at roof contractors this next month. That's what I'd like to do. And, you know, we all know that that's going on and we can feed into that. You know, we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff here. I don't know if people realize, but when that building disappears, it isn't going to just be snip on wires. Everything has to be disconnected from that panel there. That antenna, the fire chief has no use for it. So these are things that maybe a lot of us aren't aware of because we aren't necessarily always here. And it would be a great help, I think, to have somebody. You wouldn't have to come out here and pull the weeds. Maybe we could hire somebody to do it.
I just want to write what I've written down so far on these ideas. So going back way to earlier in our conversation, on item 5, it said receive and receipt other township payments, resolve discrepancies with the treasurer. And then a new item 10 would be noticing and reporting township hall and ground maintenances. Gate quotes when asked, or
Yeah,
is there others that you had?
I have one other, for discussion. Whose responsibility is the record room? Is it the planning commission? Well, I know they have records, there's maps. There's also township board files in there, meeting minutes and things like that. Who's the overall consultant of that particular room? And is that something that could be put under the office manager position, just as oversight, caretaker, and
I don't know the answer to this.
I'll give it a stab at, it's a shared. As you
is that the
know,
word you were looking for, Dave?
I like this, it's a Waldorf Astoria with tons of rooms, but it's a shared records room. And there's the clerk, I have records in there. There are records of the township generally in there. There are zoning records in there. There have been fire department records, which will be moved to the new station at some point. So it's a shared type responsibility.
But maybe to use an example again, I was looking for the fire station building plans, not the site plans, but the building plans. That's something that we should have, and we should know where to find them. I don't know, to me, it'd be nice if we had a person in the house who knew where those were. And I could see that being the scope of an office manager. I could see a lot of things, though, unfortunately, that could be the scope of an office manager, including some of the things that to do. So, but we do need somebody to know where those building plans, because right now we may or may not have them.
Well, I know Carl has helped me several times on getting documents to me. Like that is not something, I mean, he has done that. So I'm just saying like, it isn't like when we had asked for remember, I think it was a solar glare study on the thing. Carl was quickly able to get that. So I don't, I don't know, does that fall under 6 and provide information via telephone, email, over the counter for various township services and related matters? Can that fall under that, or do you feel it needs to be separated out for board members? I don't know what you were thinking about in that.
I think that one, the assist, the one that's already there. Because I think he can assist anybody with.
I mean, and he has, Carl has helped, so in that regard. I just, is there other things though? Like I said, Dave wants to get, we want to find a resolution on this, but
So let me ask you this. So whose responsibility is it to make sure that the township has building plans that reflect the building that we're going to take possession of?
I would think in the case of the fire department, be the fire chief. Would be his responsibility to make sure that he gets the building plans when it becomes our building and his building to administer. That's been some of the problem up to this point, is it's not our building. It's for us, but it's not ours at the current moment. And I know, to speak to one of the things, I know Carl was a great assistance in locating the plans when I needed to see them for our station, for the current station one.
So who would be responsible for the building plans for this building?
If they were filed with the planning commission or the zoning administrator, it would be the zoning administrator.
Just out of curiosity, are all of our zoning things now, because we have SCM, CCI, is that where they have all those? How do we get access to those?
It's a question I never asked,
I'm
but
not aware that they have anything other than what was sent to them electronically.
Do they send them back? I just don't, I mean, I don't.
I don't know.
they sent them back to us, Carl. Yep.
And then they send them back to the township? Is that what happens?
Right now, anybody that applies for building. And it's sent to them electronically. They do their thing with it and then they send it all back to me electronically the same.
Okay. Where does it go after that? I just don't know.
I have a file in there for current and last year's building permits. And then when, further than that, we'll record agreement to another. Got this year's and the previous year in the office for me to reference, and if I go farther than that back, then I go into the record. But all of everything that's submitted with the application is all stapled together with the application and then put in that file. So the site plan, the building plans, the application, everything that's required is together in there in file.
Just to separate the two, the planning commission and the zoning administrator have nothing to do with the building plans, best I am aware. That's really an inspector role. So I don't think it's realistic to expect the planning commission to be responsible for building plans.
I think he's saying he's currently already doing.
I think that's what Jeff,
No, I didn't say that at all.
well, what did you say then?
I said that it's the zoning administrator's responsibility, which is exactly what Carl just said, as I understand it.
I heard the planning commission.
No, planning commission.
So
So it isn't the zoning administration, just to clarify, building plans do not come under the zoning administrator role.
No,
Yes,
they
they
come in
do.
as zoning minister.
No, they don't. It's an inspector role.
question is, does that need to
A
come in?
site plan and there's a building plans.
Does that need to be spelled out in this job description that, that Carl puts those in? He's already doing
I
it.
think he's already doing it. Where their other buildings are, and, right.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because the building inspectors have to have them. And our building inspectors currently don't have them for the fire station across the way.
Himself does not.
The question is who's responsible for the plans? It's the same question.
Well, I think Carl, he gets them and he keeps last year's and this year's in his office with him. And then he files the ones from the, that are more than a year old in the records room.
So is that something we're adding to this job description?
No, I think it's
It seems like if it's something somebody's doing, something that we want them to do, we want them to continue to do.
Yeah.
And
So-
it's significant, we would want to put it in a job
You
description.
could put it in under number 7, which it says assist with public with completion of building permits as needed, acts as a township permit officer with issuance of permits, coordinating as needing with the zoning administrator, maintains inspector payroll voucher system, completes monthly payroll for voucher for each inspector, but then it could be just maintains those records, you know. Just put maintains.
Building plans. Site plans.
I feel like it fits underneath what that was. So what he's already doing.
Is there anything else?
I would just say that I agree with Glenn that supervision part, if that section of the contract agreement could be updated.
To what we
To
have?
rep in on here,
Right,
I think
yes.
that would make more sense.
Yes,
Um,
I would agree with that.
other things,
No,
I would agree that we changed that.
now the Seth addition to the termination clause, would that go at the end of what's already there? Or would it be incorporated within what's already there somehow or another?
I was under understanding that you would replace the termination part in here and put that termination, wouldn't you, Jeff?
Well, he says, thus, this provision may be added into the termination provision
Okay,
if the board feels it is appropriate. So I just assumed it would go at the end.
So we've got an agreement here that seems to have a lot of flaws in it. I know we have a motion in front of us, I guess, I don't know if we're ready to vote on it. I guess, I personally think this needs to be tabled and it needs to be looked at. It's got so many flaws in it right now, it doesn't even make sense. Does anybody, I brought this up, does anybody know what provision F is?
where's the reference of that, Glenn? Sorry.
It's in the second paragraph at the top of the agreement.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay, thank you.
I mean, there's just too many mistakes. It's just things that don't make sense. I brought up several items which haven't been addressed. Maybe you don't care to address them.
No.
That's up to the board. I would suggest that we have a performance appraisal before we do this agreement, because Carl's been doing this for a while. Another suggestion, just so we kind of start with a clean slate, and I brought up the fact of the reporting structure so that we can potentially have monthly reports, both forward-looking and past-looking. I haven't heard anything about that.
Can you say again that forward looking versus past? On what part?
Monthly report, some way to communicate. So what's missing here, and I don't know why it's crystal clear to me, is we've been operating this way for a while, and we ran into some problems, right? So somehow jobs got added to Carl's role over time, right? And he agreed to those. Okay, again, I don't know too many employees that have that benefit of deciding what they are and aren't going to do, but he did them. And then he decided he didn't want to do them. We took them away. We're at a point where I think we need to establish where we're at clearly, so that we don't keep going through this month over month.
I hear you on, I hear what you're saying. I will say it's not uncommon within I think about even in my job, situation where we'll lose someone, someone will take on additional responsibility with the understanding it's for a season, right? And so
Could be.
I think that that's not unrealistic of like, hey, I'm gonna make sure that the township continues to run smoothly, but with the expectation, like, I'm not absorbing that for forever. And so I think,
So how would you resolve that? If it, let's say somebody said, hey, Wayne, I'd like you to do this extra work and for a year, and the year came and they said, well, we'd like you to keep doing it.
Well, then
How would you resolve
I
it?
think I would probably, in this case, I'd probably do it similar to how Carl did it in the sense of like, hey, are you going to either hire someone else new or am I gonna be compensated for that work? And I don't think that that's unreasonable in that sense, right? Like, I've been doing this. Are you guys actively looking for someone? Or or am I gonna be compensated for this extra work that's been kind of given to me?
Because Carl took on these things to help the township out. And things just, I think, came to a head and
Well, the question becomes, there's 3 days, there's 3 6.75-hour days. And I would hope the township would want to see us fill up those days with meaningful work. And I think there was meaningful work. My point in bringing it up was the way it was handled wasn't, you had a resolution here that said 4 days of work. Okay, somebody said, maybe not 4 days. How about 3 days? Right? And then somewhere along the way, somebody said, hey, we lost our zoning administrator because he saw the writing on the wall. Would you do this? Okay. And if they're big enough, then they need to come back to the board, so they do get resolved right up front. In other words, if we weren't gonna work, if it wasn't gonna be a 4-day work week, which maybe Carl never wanted a part of, I have no idea. I wasn't part of the board, but it should be brought back to the board and said, it's 3 days a week. And then someone could have said, oh, well, the salary was based on 4 days. So does that mean we're changing the salary? But none of that ever happened. And here we sit,
It's hard.
with people going, well, that agreement, we just decided we didn't want to do it.
I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move forward from that. There's been some mistakes made and and everybody's had good things here today. And I mean, go back to what Glenn said about, I don't know how bad it'd be for Carl to say, well, this is, he could tell us, list out things that he did or something I think that's kind of what you'd like to see, to report to the board what he's done.
Yeah, both for him and for us,
Right.
because I think when you're working in a role, you want to feel like you're connected with your employers. And I think one way you do that is through reporting. When I've had employees or I've worked for other managers, that's your once a month way to communicate and say, yeah, things are going good, or, oh, the priorities have changed.
But I don't want him to have to record like every 15 minutes. I mean, I've talked to
No.
people that had jobs and one guy was his boss called him up, what'd you do in this hour back?
No,
a week ago?"
and there's all different.
And I just
methods.
think that, we can, and as far as there's times where his job is probably really busy and there's times where it's not.
Right. And we have to respect that
Yeah.
in that sense. I agree. I think that is a good idea though. Like, hey, this is what I've worked on so that we, because I think there is times when people are like, well, what is Carl doing in general? Just like, and it's like, hey, look at all these great things that Carl has done. Like when I sat and talked to him with Mick, there was a lot of, interesting things how Carl had done these things, but we just didn't know about them because you don't see something, you only see things when there's a problem or an issue. And so something like that could be a way that highlights also the great things that Carl is doing in the office.
Absolutely.
Residents that, you know, I've had many residents come and talk to me and tell me he's like a breath of fresh air when you come in here. You know, and, he's helpful.
Just, yeah, like, yeah. So are you saying maybe just a monthly, like, updates of like, these are the things that have come to the township that,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable to you, Jeff.
Nope.
So, you know, I've been getting a lot of feedback from residents. This was sent to, it looks like it was sent to you, Jeff, copied me. I want to read it because Rick wasn't able to make it tonight, but, you know, so this is from Rick Sadler. He said a second special meeting wasting time on this office manager fiasco. And I do believe the fourth overall meeting, how much more time are you going to waste on this subject? It's all there in black and white, dated 8/21/23. Work hours 8:45 to 3:30, Monday through Thursday. Motion passed. And these are his words, not mine. The office manager hasn't been working on Thursday, seemingly with head nod from the old board saying it's okay. Well, guess that. What, guys? It's not okay. You can't just decide something because that was the intent. So just to stop there for a moment, I think that's the feedback I'm getting, is that the board really needs to follow through on what it's doing, and we need to reflect back on what was decided and not just dismiss it.
I'm just gonna, to play devil's advocate though, are you gonna just accept what the board decided prior to our being voted in?
As a starting point, absolutely.
So you're gonna accept the mega site as is and the decision for the zoning?
We're not talking
As
about the
is.
mega site.
Well, I'm saying that argument is, all I'm saying is with that argument.
There's no argument. I just said that I can accept the fact that that motion was passed. I can accept that. Do I agree with it? Do I want to change it? That's a separate topic.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to change
We're
something
trying to change it and,
so that we can move forward.
right.
Is I think is what we're trying to say here.
And I think the point of the note is that people are getting tired of this going on. And again, I'll bring up the approach I don't think works. You can't just all of a sudden start working on something in the background and then throw it over the wall to another person who then writes it into a contract and then throws it over to a lawyer who looks at it and goes, well, I didn't write this, but I'll give you my opinion.
Okay,
It's not the right way.
at the same token, right? Like,
So I'd completely rewrite this thing. I'd completely rewrite it.
all I'm gonna say though is, Glenn, we're working with Rob Thal on the 425, talking and having communication. We could argue that the whole board isn't in privy to that knowledge right now.
No, there's a different, this board voted on that subcommittee.
Right.
They gave us direction.
Right.
Where was the direction to rewrite this?
The
Where was that
supervisor,
direction?
the supervisor gave direction here to be able to start to work on it. We had initially with Mick and I, we had some sitting down conversations months ago, prior to our May 5th. We had heard multiple times through, including Rick, about we need to get this resolved. We can't get that resolved. We can't get that resolved unless there's work happening in between.
Exactly. And so that's why you would do that at a public meeting where you talk about it and potentially ask for input from all other board members, right?
We have in June, we had a meeting about it. We had it in May.
I don't remember any motion
We-
to create
did we
any
not-
subcommittee
We didn't
or to
create
work
any-
on any contract.
We didn't create any subcommittee. I took this on because we'd heard about it. We started out in May, beginning of May. We had a meeting and then we went on, we couldn't agree. So, then I just said after the last meeting, you know, the residents want us to get this done. I said, let's get this done and bring something to the board. And that's what we've done.
And this is what we brought.
Right, and that's what we brought,
And
just like you brought.
it's better than what we started with.
Right.
Right.
And
I don't think so, but well, at least it's something that is in writing and that we can talk about.
Right, and I mean, just
At least
because,
instead of going around in circles.
yeah, I mean, we can talk about it and talk about it. And, you know, there's always room to improve things after once we get an agreement. And I think that's just, that it's important to get this done and we can continue, I mean, everything's a work in progress.
I agree. I think we've come out with some great solutions of things to add to this. I think that we've said that there's some things in terms of the agreement that we want some clarity on. I don't think it's wrong to necessarily, if we want to ask the lawyers exactly about how that amendment goes in, I think that could, if we want to get clarity on that, but I think we could. You're saying you don't feel comfortable voting on this now today. I think
Well, I
maybe
think the
that's
motion
true.
is already made.
Right, the motion, we'd have to vote that down, but we could incorporate these things and I could bring it back next week on Monday, which is the 21st, right? I could incorporate those things, we could get those answers from the lawyer to do that, if that makes the board feel better. I'm just curious, where do people feel they stand on it, is a question. Because I do want to respect our,
Yeah, our insurance.
our insurance person as well, who's been very patient.
I think from my perspective, I know we spent a lot of time on this, but we spent the time on it because it's important. And we have to get it as right as we can. You know, we're only human. There's always going to be another question, another what if, but it is a work in progress and we are making progress. We're closer now than we were, you know, last week and the week before and the month before. You know, this is important. And I think we spent a lot of time on it because it is important.
And I think we can always tweak it as we go, so. So are you guys ready for a vote on the motion?
I make sure I understand what you're saying, Dave. So you're saying, hey, let's accept this agreement and then work on it some more later on versus
Well, I mean-
what I'm saying is I'd like to see us make a good agreement and then vote on it and make it right.
I think there's enough that maybe it would be nice to clean it up first. And then we can vote on it on Monday if I'm fine with that. But I agree, I would like this sooner than later because there's some bigger issues that need our time and attention.
So we either,
Well,
We have to vote on the motion that's.
I'll withdraw if the seconder wants,
I'll
will
withdraw.
agree.
I'll
I'll
agree.
withdraw the motion at this time. And then I'd like to make another motion, which I'll tell you is, will be that it designate Wayne and the supervisor to present an improved version of this at the regular meeting.
I'll second that.
all right. That should be a roll call vote.
Well,
Doesn't have to be.
just discussion or not?
Yeah.
Sure. So I just heard Dave Bozzard and Wayne. So you don't want any input from the rest of the board?
I've,
I brought up several items here.
yes, and I've been reading,
Put or not?
love that info. I've written them down, your input. Let's see, noticing, so it makes
You
me
don't
think
have to go through them. I can do it separately.
okay.
I just wondered,
I
I
wrote-
wondered how it was gonna go between now and next week.
I wrote down those things.
Right. Yep.
That's why I was pushing to say, like, what things did you want?
Okay, motion been withdrawn. And Wayne and one is presented that Wayne and I would work on this with input from board members. I guess all those, if we do voice vote,
Yeah.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
All those opposed, say
Jason Orton with Chatman Agency. We handle the insurance here for the township, have for many years. I know I'm relatively new to a bunch of you, so I'm going to kind of start as if we didn't even know each other. So prior to doing this job, I used to work for the House and Senate back in the 1999. David Chatman, who runs the agency, says we have a municipal and banking division, and I need somebody who understands governmental entities, how they work, how boards work. And so he asked me to come over there and work with him. I have been doing that since 1999. We write approximately 83 municipalities and banks. We have 3 guys who work underneath me. I'm the primary, their manager, if you will, that manages the day-to-day operations of all that. Partly how we are structured. Typically, you wouldn't see the guy who is managing everybody at the meetings, but how we are structured there is because I have serviced this account from the beginning. I will always service this account, even though I have other responsibilities. The primary reason we do that is we want to maintain continuity. You know, you're seeing the same person, understanding the history of that entity without having to pass it along. So I've been doing that since 1999. We've had you with previous carriers because at the agency we offer multiple different carriers. We're not married to one particular. We do have some standards as to who we will allow to market our municipalities to. One of those criteria is that they have to have a program that is specifically designed for municipalities. We have at the agency, we have 50 different carriers that we partner with to offer insurance. Most of them, I will tell you, do not understand public officials or public officials liability or zoning liability or any of the things that are attached to that. Because of that, when we are entering into a contract possibly with a new carrier, we do run them through, we look at all their forms and make sure that everything is proper with that. That being said, we had you with the PAR plan at one point. You were with Trident exclusively years ago. The proposal that is essentially the same as what we had last year that I provided you for you this year is a combination of Trident and then Greenwich Insurance, which is actually holding some of the public entity portion of the coverage. I've outlined some of it in mine that I'm going to kind of go over. If you have a question, I'd be happy to answer it. Should have the answer. If I don't, I would get back with you. Most likely would. Page 2, we're at the general liability section. As you see the limits there on the top where it says bodily injury, property damage at the $1 million limit is a per occurrence incident. So you have an aggregate there down below the 2 million, meaning that you can have 2 $1 million claims in a year. However, this isn't all the insurance you have that would cover under the general liability. I'm going to talk about this right up front. We have something called an excess policy that sits behind all of your liability policies other than the public officials. I'll make that note. So we actually have additional coverage on that, but I will go over the primaries, and then when we get to the excess, I'll explain that a little bit more. We do have a medical expense limit. This is what's called med pay. This is usually what we call good guy insurance, meaning somebody walked out front, they slipped and fell, they broke their ankle, we called an ambulance, we just paid the bill, you just sent it to us. It's more like, hey, it was our fault, we took care of it, everything's good. So we do have a limit of that to $2,500 for that type of thing. If they did come back at you with a lawsuit later on showing that you had negligence, we would deal with that under the general liability, the main portion of the limits on that section. There under optional coverage, you'll see that we have additional insured per written contract or agreement. This is a difference that we have in some of our carriers. Some of them will not allow this, meaning if you have an additional, somebody asks for additional insured status from you, which is rare, but does happen with municipalities. I would have to go and get approval and have the special forms drawn up for this. With this particular program, as soon as you enter into a contract that requires additional insured status or insurance certificate, it's automatic. We just would process it for you. So that is it's a difference that we have in some of the other programs we have. So I'm going to skip page 3 because it doesn't have a whole lot that's really interesting in there. Page 4, automobile. We have a fair amount of fire trucks. I will tell you, fire trucks are insured differently. This is one of the things about the differences between municipalities and a normal business, is that the fire trucks are very expensive to replace. And so we insure them on what we call a replacement cost, or it's a hybrid agreed value. Meaning that if you notice under the cost new that we have all there, those are the numbers that we have calculated. And actually came from you guys last year as to how much, if we wrecked one of these trucks and the truck was totaled out, could not be recertified to be used by the state of Michigan, you would get that full amount to replace that truck. Now, as you know, your personal pickup truck, you're driving that, you get in a wreck, the insurance adjuster is going to come out and he's going to give you actual cash value for it. Meaning they're going to take depreciation and all that type of thing. And then usually nobody's happy. But with the agreed value form, it would be the full amount. So the one truck you have for 700,000, we've done it. We've written really large checks to replace fire trucks. In fact, a lot of them that we're doing all happen. I know we have the highway out here. They all tend to get rear-ended because they're using them as blockers. So there's actually, I mean, you're using $1 million truck as a barrier, which I'd much rather them hit the truck than a guy. But there's also a push in the state of Michigan, and actually I'm working with on allowing, like, getting these cheaper, large semi vehicles that have the big bumpers that you usually see on the highway, and then having fire departments have those and use those as block carriers. Because then if you're wrecking those, you're talking about 50 grand to replace as opposed to $1 million truck. But that's a side note.
Can I ask a quick question? What is OCN? There's under automobile standard coverage, says OCN, and then there's a number. I'm on page 4. I think I'm on the same page.
Yeah, we should be OCN.
Second column in the second table.
It's 2.7 million.
Oh, that's total limit. So they've taken all of the vehicle limits and thrown them all together. So that's done simply for rating purposes. So when they're trying to figure out, okay, how much are we going to charge? They total all those vehicles and throw them in one lump sum. So, yeah. Any question on the truck stuff? Because that's usually the most. Property coverage on page 6. This is coverage for the buildings and contents of the buildings. I know that we're in the middle of a new fire station type thing. And then once that is completed and you take ownership of it, let me know. I will tell you while it is under construction, make sure that you have either through somebody, the builder or whoever, you have purchased a builder's risk policy to cover that while it's under construction. Because while it is under construction, it's not covered under here. You need a separate policy for that. If you look at the top where it says building, the limit there, much like the fire truck limit, we've taken the entire building limits and thrown them all in there. We blanket limit the buildings. So if you have one building that burns down and you're like, hey, we had, 2 million on this building to replace, but it's going to end up costing us, 2.2. Yeah, we'll pay the 2.2. It's because what we've done is we've taken all the limits and thrown them in one big bucket.
Can I ask,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, with the builder's risk, is that until we have occupancy?
Correct.
Okay, so occupancy is the determining, not, I was wondering, because we have a punch list afterwards and I didn't know if that makes.
When you take ownership of it, and honestly, there's some grace period. We have automatic coverage on it for, I think it's 60 days. So, but yeah, it's once you take ownership and say, okay, this is now mine. Doesn't mean they still got work to do there. It's just that it's not their primary care, custody, and control.
That's why I was curious.
Yep.
Glenn?
Just out of curiosity, have you been asked to give an estimate of the premium for the new fire station?
No.
So would that be something you could develop?
Are you talking for the builder's risk, or are you saying how much it's going to be once the building is built?
Once it's complete, we don't own the building.
Yes,
right now.
once I can do that. Yeah, if you give me the number, the rebuild cost of it, yeah, I can send it to the company and get that to you. So
Rebuild meaning what it costs to build it?
what it will cost to build it. Yeah, we do replacement costs. So there's no actual cash value, there is no depreciation, actual cash value on the buildings. We do replacement costs.
So what you see over there was a complete site development, right? If it burned down, we'd probably just have to replace the building. So would it be more like replacement cost for the Morton building?
Yes, it would just be for the building and the contents that are there.
Contents.
So yeah, because you think of it this way, stuff underground, stuff gonna be fine. So parking lot mostly will be fine. There might be some repair to do, but. Deductible, you would be responsible for the first $1,000. This is just to keep, hey, I had a, winner thing, so. The next page, equipment breakdown, page 7, this is more for boilers and machine. This is a leftover type insurance from the old world where everybody had, actually had boilers in the house as opposed to furnaces, but it's called equipment breakdown. This would cover, we've covered furnaces that have been struck by lightning, things such as that would cover under this. Page 8, there's a whole bunch. We got 8, 9, and 10 that have, I don't know if you ever looked at your homeowner's policy. Hopefully you all have. You notice you usually have those 2 or 3 pages that just have a whole bunch of stuff on it. Like, yeah, we'll pay for your freezer meat if that, this is what these sections are for. A lot of bells and whistles, that type of stuff that is automatically thrown in and added to the policy. The one I did want to talk about briefly was business income extra expense. It's at the very top. For $500,000. This comes into play when this building burns down and we have to still conduct business somewhere. So we end up renting a place in town, to temporarily, run office, collect taxes, all that type of stuff. This allows us the additional funds over top of what it would be to rebuild the building to still continue doing business and that.
Can I ask a question? Back on 7, equipment breakdown coverage. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what equipment we're talking about breaking down.
Yeah, consider it this thing like the old days when they had boilers. Often you'd have a boiler, breakdown, mechanical failure, something like that.
Oh, if we had a AVCH.
ACHV, yeah, if you had if your air conditioner broke, yeah.
HVAC.
Yeah, depending on what happened and how it happened. For example, I'll give you of one that we actually had a claim. It was actually a large generator behind a fire department, and for some reason it burned up. So something went wrong on the electrical and it burned up. We replaced that under the equipment breakdown because it's not really a building. It's attached to the building, but it's not really a building. That's the type of thing this would cover. Page 11. This is under inland marine. I'm going to explain the term inland marine because I can't tell you how many times I've gone and somebody was angry because we don't have a boat. Why do we have an inland marine policy? So this is an old English term for when they were colonizing the United States. You could go to Lloyd's of London and actually insure all your dry goods, your wagon, all your gear and harnesses as you put it on the boat. So if something had happened to that equipment that is an inland equipment and it's put on a marine boat and sailed across the ocean, you could actually insure that. Well, this is a carryover. So the term really means miscellaneous equipment that moves in and out and around. So consider like turnout gear, that could be on the backs of the firemen. It could be on the truck. It could be in the station. We can't say it's building contents because it often leaves. So that's where the term comes from. It's a little history lesson. But in addition, this is where we would replace this type of stuff at replacement cost. I just replaced a bunch of thermal imager and a bunch of stuff that somebody left a cabinet on a truck open and then they went down the highway. So please don't do that. This is where that type of stuff would be covered. We do have some things outlined. We have some generators on here. Outdoor, I know there was a lot of that. We added the sirens, if you will. That was done actually a couple years ago on that type of thing. So. Under page 12, we talk about the crime section. Up on the top, we have employee dishonesty at 100,000. Now, under state statute, treasurer, deputy treasurer, clerk, and deputy clerk all are required to have a public official bond that includes both failure of performance as well as basically embezzlement coverage on that. We do have bonds for you guys already, but employees do not need that. The employees would fall outside of that and under the crime portion of the policy. So if you had an issue with that on an employee, that would be covered under this. The only stipulation of that would be is if that employee was also a clerk or deputy treasurer or deputy clerk.
So let me ask you, so hypothetically, if someone who was not a deputy treasurer or treasurer, let's say they lost some money, right? I mean, it fell behind the desk and, it's gone and, we don't know, we don't know what happened to it. That's not really a crime. It's just an error or an accident.
Mysterious disappearance of funds, which I've actually had, yes. And those are not covered because there has to be an insurable event. So there wasn't any, it's just gone. So what they would likely do is if we had one of those, we come in and we do an investigation to figure out what happened. So,
okay, so what I'm trying to get at is, we've obviously talked quite a bit about an office manager and he does handle money. It's not statutory, right? It's by board decision. So how are we covered for the monies so I don't know. I mean, I can think of a million examples. We handle a lot of money during tax time, right?
mhm.
How does that come into play if something goes off the rails, I guess?
Well, typically tax funds, I mean, it used to be everybody would pay in cash, but that still happens in some communities, less than others. Often it's check. Usually the does the check get cashed? No. Okay, it's probably lost, cancel the check, write a recheck. Money transfers are the same. That's usually from bank directly to bank. So then there's not an issue there. So really your biggest exposure happens to be in the scenario you're talking about is just cash. And unfortunately, insurance companies, in fact, even on your home, if you look at your home policy, there's very limited coverage for cash. Because it's hard to prove where it went to because there's no record. So in the instance, what you're talking about is if you had somebody, an employee who was doing that and there was embezzlement or money was stolen, that would be covered under the crime portion of the policy. Mysterious disappearance of cash, I could turn it in and fight for you on it, but they're going to ask like, okay, how do we know that, where it went? There's no way to track it. Is the receipt, it could be the receipt from the individual. Did they write a receipt for the taxes that they paid in cash to that individual? Where's that filed? Oh, there's no receipt here. That type of thing would all have to be looked at and gone through. But as far as asking, can I get insurance for just mysterious disappearance of, it doesn't exist. Or if it does, it'd be so expensive, we wouldn't buy it anyway. So.
So Jason, we hear the term occasionally, the old usage term blanket bond.
Yeah.
As I understand it, this is part really what we don't do blanket bonds anymore. They do.
No, it used to be like back in the 80s and 90s, if you wanted a crime policy for your employees that were handling money, you had to go and buy a bond. And that was the only vehicle for that type of coverage. In the 2000s, the company started coming out with an actual crime policy that essentially mirrors what a bond did without having to go through all the hassle. Because often when you have to get a bond, other than a public official bond, those are pretty easy to do. But if I was to go and get a honesty or surety bond, which I could get, they're going to ask a bunch of questions. They're going to ask about your bank account. They're going to ask, and have you filed for bankruptcy? It became very problematic for small business, medium businesses who were only looking for $100,000 worth of coverage to get it because of all the steps that they were going to have to run through on that in order to do that. So about in the 2000s, a lot of the companies started coming out with, you know, the crime coverage. The municipal programs I have, every one of the municipal programs I have mirror what we have on this one, which is usually the 100,000. I got a few very large townships that ask for more, which we're able to do, but they have multiple employees and several people touching money. But I had the same conversation with one of them the other day. It's like, well, how much of it is in cash? And how much of it can't you trace? You know, oh, not much. Oh, okay. I mean, I'll sell it to you, but I don't think you need it.
So explain to me the difference between a bond and an insurance policy.
Well, they're two different vehicles for risk. I mean, it depends on what kind of bond, because we got a surety bond, we could have a completion bond. A bond basically would be a very specific type of insurance policy designed for a particular coverage. Whereas an insurance policy is a little bit broader. You have what's called a broad form policy, where it would cover a wide variety of events that could take place.
Okay.
So.
And is there a concise definition or description of a surety bond?
Surety bond is basically a crime bond. So it's like if I steal the money, it's going to get replaced. Not to me, but to another entity. I've actually had this where I went and I told a clerk, oh yeah, you got a public official bond that covers your due diligence and making sure you don't steal the money, as well as making sure you actually do the job. And she went, oh, 50 grand. I mean, I've had more than that in here. If I make a mistake, I want for it to be taken care of. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This bond comes into play if you stole the money. So what happens is the insurance company is going to come after you for the money. They're going to pay the township back. Yeah. So it's like, I don't think this isn't a oopsie, I made a mistake coverage. This is like, yeah, I thought I was going to go to Mexico for the rest of my life. Mistake. So. We good there? Page 12, well, actually, we're on page 12. The lower section of page 12 where you see excess liability, we have an additional $7 million there. That sits on top of your general liability and your auto coverage. So it gives us broader defense in that. So in reality, we would have $8 million single occurrence limit. So.
And what are we covering again?
That would be for the general liability, which was the first page that we went over, and as well as the auto portion of it. Actually, auto and employer's liability as well, which is basically benefits it's part of the general liability. It's benefits you promise your employees. So.
Just it's something, I'm just noticing the dates are not correct. It's on page 13 and on page 2. That doesn't change the other information, correct? Okay, I just was making sure calendar year.
Yep, and I know how that happened.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure like it's not going to change the numbers.
Would you say 2? 13 I see. What was the other one?
Page, I think it was 2. It's on retroactive date 1/7/124.
No, the retroactive date one is correct. So
that's correct.
That's supposed to be that way. Yeah, it's always 1 year back. No, the other one under 13, which we'll talk about in a minute. Yeah, I know that because when I put this together, I was pulling from the previous proposal and there was no difference in change. So that was my clerical error. So.
Nope, no, you're fine.
As far as going to 13, this is the public entity liability with employment related acts. We've actually had some activity on this particular line in the township. So years ago, we had you with Trident in this, but there was enough activity that Trident asked us to put it elsewhere. So this is where we're at right now. I did approach them because it's been relatively quiet this last year. I did approach them this year about possibly trying to align everything. I prefer everything to be with one carrier. It's easier. And you run into less complications if you end up with a claim that may fall on multiple lines. But they said they wanted to give it another year to look at that. So I will be investigating again that for you next year. So with this covers, think of it as like a professional policy. So if you were an engineer or an insurance guy or a doctor, you have to buy something that would protect you under your official capacity, your professional capacity. So this is what it does. It's a little broader than that because it actually covers anybody acting on behalf of the entity under the authority of the board. So that's just not you here sitting making decisions, but that's the fire chief. That's the, the guy who's responding because he's acting in good faith under your authority. This does not, however, cover subcontractors. So if you have a subcontractor who's doing whatever for you, mowing the lawn, that type of thing, they should have their own insurance and you should be getting certificates of insurance from them, showing that.
So this is similar to like errors and omissions?
Correct.
Okay, but so what is public officials management for $1 million?
Yeah, that's public officials liability. So it's an individual acting on behalf of the entity under the authority of the board. That's a public official. The definition of a public official working for the general public under your authority. So that includes you and anybody acting under your behalf.
And what's the liability part? In other words, what are we
Could you get-
covering?
What could you get sued for? Zoning infractions. You could have people
Okay.
come back and say, hey, you violated your zoning ordinance and now I'm going to sue you. That's a common one.
Okay.
Or, that type of thing. It also covers employee related acts. So if you end up with a employment issue, failure to promote, something such as that, discrimination, that would fall under this as well. So I will tell you, your limits are lower than I usually would get for an entity your size. And next year we'll look at if I can raise them. But it was a few years ago when we had issues even getting it placed. It was really, really expensive for you. And that's partly why our deductibles are a little bit higher than I generally like them to be. I'm okay usually in public officials to you having some skin in the game because I'll be honest with you, most of these claims do not come from the fire department or the chief or the volunteer. It's usually from a board action, honestly. So
And what is the deductible? Is that?
they're on the right-hand side
Okay,
there.
I gotcha.
Yeah, the retainer.
So a lot of times there's what I call a knee in the curve, right? Where you could take on more risk yourself to have a significant lowering of a rate or the opposite, where you could increase your coverage without a significant impact, right? In other words, it's not a linear thing. Have we looked at that? Is that something that's worth looking at again to see where we're at in the?
Yeah, this year when I sent it out, I did some, but there wasn't the deductible range. The only range it was going to be to where it's going to start to bring down the public officials premium is if we started getting into the $75,000 to $100,000 range for an action. And I'm uncomfortable with that. If you want me to do it, I'll do it, but I wouldn't advise it because it all sounds good right now until you have to write the check. So, yeah. Next year, when I go back and renegotiate with the company, in particular Trident, that'll be something that will be on the docket to look at. Because Trident will probably end up looking at taking you back next year. We'll end up with higher limits and the excess will go over top of it. They'll probably still have a required deductible in there, but it may be more feasible and beneficial to do it that way.
And just so because I'm new to the board, Trident's reluctance has to do with the lawsuit.
Previous
against-
lawsuits, yeah.
Okay. Multiples or?
I did not bring the loss history with me, but I can look.
Our frequent flyer under that category no longer lives in the township.
That is true.
I know.
Last page 14 is the premium breakdown. I put what you paid last year down there on the bottom, just for reference. Everybody always seems to be interested in that. And then what it is this year, as you can see, we are well within, actually, I wish I could, this was the only, your increase was minimal compared to what I've had to deliver to some other municipalities. So I actually wish I was doing that to others, but that being said, that's been a quiet year, like I said, so far this year. So the company saw no reason to make any adjustment on that.
Did we in this, I guess, what I'm gathering here, one of the areas that we had a significant change was, under the public entity liability. Was that a big hit? Where we moved from Trident to Greenwich?
Yes. Yeah, that was the primary driver of the premium increase previously.
Do you have a order of magnitude of what that was?
How much it was?
Our premium?
Say it was probably 10 grand. Going off of memory alone, so.
But that'd be something that we could look back on.
Yep.
This information, right?
And I will tell you with the insurance companies, I know people think it's like, oh, I had a good year, so it's gonna go back to the way it was 5 years ago, right? And that's not. So it's the same curve you were talking about before, so. Completes my presentation. Do I have any outlying questions?
Oh. I know a couple guys in the insurance business and they told me, hey, there's basically two insurance companies that handle municipalities. Is that, didn't sound like that's where you started, but I've only heard the two names.
Yeah, they're close, but not quite accurate. There's actually 7 agencies in the state of Michigan who deal with municipalities. There are approximately 6 different markets. So some of those 7 agencies are required to offer only one particular type of coverage. We're one of 4 agencies who have, we get to use everybody. And it's because of it's a contractual thing with them. It's a very specific type of coverage. There's not a lot of people who want to come and talk in a public board meeting, which is why a lot of guys stay out of it. The other one is it's a very specific type of coverage that sometimes works against the norm in general business, particularly like the auto stuff.
Could they get more restrictive because we're in Michigan or not?
No, not necessarily. The other states have the same thing. In fact, I was in Wyoming last week and I was talking to the guy who runs their pool out there. They're worse. They only have like 3 agencies who do it and 2 companies, and both of them are bad. And so he was kind of, calling me like, hey, can you come up here and maybe bring some of the markets and we can work in, and that type of thing. But Wyoming's a long way away. So, beautiful state, but it's a long way away. So yeah, they're half right on that. I get referrals all the time from a small village. It's like, hey, the local village came down and want me to do their insurance. I have no idea what any of this stuff means. Can you come and help me? And then I'll generally will come in there and assist on that type of thing. So like I said, I've been doing government since before 99.
So there's maybe as many as 7, but you pretty much like the 2 companies we're working with, is that?
Well, they're the only 2 that were offering anything that was reasonable to you. So like I sent it to Travelers, but the quote was ridiculous, which made sense because Travelers generally wants to work in 6-figure accounts or higher. They're not interested in mid-tier, $50,000 accounts. Selective was another one, but their terms were a little stiffer on the public officials due to the previous claims that it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And one was just a lateral movement. And so, yeah, that's kind of why we mentioned this. I don't generally market every year either. So I'm usually on a 3-year term cycle to where I'll send it out to everybody because unfortunately, yours has been a little bit different. I've had to do it the last couple of years just because of the public officials issue. But on a typical account to where everything's running pretty smooth and we're getting a few claims, but nothing major, I'll only market it every 3 years. Because if I only got, think about it, 7 or 5 or 6 carriers, and I send it your account to them every single year, sooner or later, they're just not going to give me a good number because they know I'm not really serious about analyzing the coverages, and I'm just basically trying to keep everybody honest. I got a good enough relationship with all my markets that they know how I work, that I don't generally run into pricing issues to where they're gouging and that type of stuff. So mostly because they know I have other markets and I will move it. So.
Thank you.
We good?
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Yep, no problem. I sit on a been on a planning commission and a school board, so I am well aware how that's. So you guys all have a pleasant rest of the day and evening. I'm headed back to Lansing, so.
Okay,
Thanks, Jason.
take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
There any other matters that need to be brought? Okay,
It does, yeah, has a $50,000 deductible.
okay.
You never know.
Unlike it.
So there's no other matters that anybody can think of, so. I'll open it up to audience comments.
I'm Kowalski, Marshall Township. I just want to recognize our new deputy treasurer, Elizabeth Wright.
Okay.
And you have won an all-expense paid trip to Mexico.
Left up to me here. First thing, should we be scratching our heads when the treasurer starts asking questions about missing funds and if they can be insured? All right. Well, the other elephant in the room, of course, is what's been going on with the mega site, and especially in view of what happened back with the passing of what was marketed as the Big Beautiful Bill. Now, we initially heard that when that was going to be passed, there was going to be a severe curtailing of any subsidization of electrical vehicle industry projects and solar fields, battery production facilities, and so on. But evidently there was some last minute haggling and negotiation, and what ended up coming out was kind of a watered down version. We still have not heard the specifics on it yet, but from the pro mega site voices such as Bridge of Michigan, they came out with a very non-journalistic story with the headline Marshall residents with a sigh of relief as to the exception of the megasite being taken out of the EV subsidy loop. But we still haven't heard any definitive things on it yet. And you got to be worried about anything that says itself to be journalism, but starts out with so-and-so breathes a sigh of relief. That's, that's not journalism, that's propaganda. But in terms of the non-pro megasite people, we've been making gains up in Lansing. There have been hearings held. There was one set of hearings held that dealt with undue foreign influence in public business, and those bills got passed. So there are now laws that prohibit our public agencies from specifically doing business with certain undesirable countries like China, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, etc. But also, Representative Steve Cara, who is the chair of the House Oversight Committee on Corporate Subsidies, held some hearings concerning them, specifically about the megasite. The first one he held back on June 4th this guy right here was one of the speakers and did an excellent job of presenting the reasons for not proceeding with the mega site. And then Julianne Bryant came and gave a good discussion from the viewpoint of someone who lives over in Squaw Creek. And then on the 11th, Tara held a hearing, a joint hearing together with the Committee on Department of Homeland Security about the CCP threat. Now, it was initially about MEDC and its dealings. I don't know if you've ever attended one of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation's hearings. They're all very much like the public hearing that was on May 1st at the city. You've got a huge influx of people, grassroots people, all against it, but then you bring in your paid spokespeople who are there to pat each other on the back and talk about, you know, the blah, blah, blah jobs narrative. Now, MEDC came and spoke their piece, again, promoting what they're doing and how they're somehow benefiting the state. And as soon as they got done, they packed up and walked out. Right after, former Ambassador Joseph Sella got up and gave a 20-minute dissertation as to why the CCP threat is real. And he actually cited the law, the Chinese law, that requires every Chinese national who works outside of the country, works in another country, they are required to spy for the Chinese Communist Party. These are real threats. The things that are happening, which are happening across the country in terms of, you know, buying Chinese, buying farmland and those kind of issues, are now starting to be pushed back against. And on the 25th of June, there was a second hearing by CARA about the megasite, but this one was for the proponents of the megasite. And he sent out 76 individual letters, invitation letters to, you know, who they are, members of the DDA, the people that signed that 100-signature letter that went up to Representative Wahlberg. Personal invitations to come and testify in favor of the megasite. The only response that CARA got back was a letter from Jim Durian and a letter from Scott Wolfersberger. I think each were less than 2 pages long. Again, with the blah, blah, blah jobs narrative. No one showed up. Not one person showed up to justify what was going on with the megasite. So CARA handed it over to those of us who showed up to see what was going on, and we gave them more information. Now, we had meetings with CARA outside of those hearings, and we provided them documentation and other information that would be helpful and in their investigating. We're asking for a legislative investigation of everything that's been going on with the megasite stuff, going all the way back to May.
We're gonna have to cut you off. Thank you.
I don't have any constitutional authority to do that, but okay.
I will say, Barry, I watched all three. Barry, I watched all three of those, and they are very good if people get a chance to watch them. I would just say too, on the 25th, they held a separate thing in proponent with for a big media release, and I did find it interesting that they gave tours of the Blue Oval Battery facility to media people. Scott Wolfersberger was at that engagement, didn't show up to the other one, but it was interesting that Marshall Township was not represented. I don't think that Marshall Township has even been able to walk through that facility yet, but yet we had media and other members. So that is very interesting that MEDA continues, we say that we have an intergovernmental relationship with them, and yet we still haven't been included in any of that. We haven't been included to go walk through that facility. At least I know I haven't been contacted to, and that's concerning to me.
Any board member comments?
One other thing, I just want to let you know, Glenn and I have met with Rob Thal once. I think we're planning on meeting with him again tomorrow about the 425 agreement. He brought up the water franchise agreement, and I'm just making you guys aware that he is very concerned that we haven't done any motions in regards to the water franchise agreement. I think at a minimum, we should probably, even though we know the city will reject it, at least approve what Seth had originally, in my opinion. I think at least what he had put forth about the annexation and not annexing that portion, because he thinks that we have strong negotiating power there. But he says the longer we wait with that, courts won't side with us. So that is something that he has.
On that.
We already passed that.
We passed it.
Did we pass it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been
Okay.
conveyed. That's what they rejected.
Okay,
They
that's
rejected it,
rejected?
and then
Okay.
they just sent something, and then the
They
city
sent us-
council.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So then we need to, he goes, we need to do something and make decisions about doing something, because sitting on it is what he's saying is gonna maybe be harmful for us.
Well, I thought
Yeah.
that's what the committee or somebody was going to recommend,
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
were going.
I'm just naming that's something
I
that
know.
Rob's like, we need to do something, and we can either double down and say no, which I think it's worthwhile, I think, but we'll talk more about that, I think maybe Monday after we talk with Rob some more tomorrow. But I just want to let you know, he brought up, wouldn't you agree, Glenn? He brought up the water franchise agreement and kept coming back to that when we were trying to just talk about the 425.
So yeah, I'll just build on that a little bit. We were supposed to meet today at 2:30. But this meeting preempted that, so. The sooner we can get notices out on special meetings and their content, the better off we are for planning purposes for our subcommittee, but it's rescheduled for tomorrow. I think just for the broader understanding of the water franchise, what the state of Michigan and Battle Creek did by putting water lines through Emmett and Marshall Township it's not legal. They need to have a franchise, according to our lawyers. And that was only surfaced sort of after the fact, and actually at the Emmett Township meeting, and I want to say it was December, was shortly after they took their oath of office, that this was surfaced, because I don't think our law firm and Emmett's law firm are the same law firm. They weren't even aware of the program. So I think it kind of gives you an idea of how this whole project has been handled, and the things that Barry mentioned that were brought up at the subcommittee meeting about how MEDC operates. And of course, we now know that they were raided and are now being pursued by the Attorney General. But yeah, hopefully we'll bring back something to the board. We can't make promises for next week, but hopefully we'll bring something back.
At least we
At
have
least
a
an
report
update.
where we're at.
Wayne, is it hard to get to that video?
Oh, I can get to it. Yep, I got it right here.
I want to show you a video that was sent to me. If you can go full screen, maybe. By Kevin Murphy, who runs a furniture business on Michigan Avenue. So this is his business parking lot. he has no control over any of this. It's just people who are showing up into his parking lot. When he's trying to run a furniture business, he's extremely unhappy, and he's gonna look to the assessor to see whether his property has lost value because of its new proximity to M96. But I've gotten several complaints, especially over in Squaw Creek. I think, people can't, apparently, Mick, you probably know this, but apparently he can't get from there to here very easily.
No, you gotta go to South Kalamazoo or 12 Mile and hit Michigan Avenue
Right,
for through next Monday.
right.
11 minutes versus 4 minutes.
And to make matters worse, unfortunately, I know at least one person who couldn't get out of their subdivision today because today was chip and seal day.
Yeah, they started around,
It was a
11.
double whammy.
yeah.
But these are the growing pains of this disaster that they call a mega mess. It's an unfortunate situation, and it may never actually open, in my opinion. But that's all I had. Oh, I did welcome Liz. We do have a new deputy treasurer, Liz Wayne. I'm sorry, Liz Wright. She took her oath of office today, so thank you for volunteering.
What's the big pay, she said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shopping.
All $383 a month.
All right. Yes, we're adjourned.
Okay.
That because your phone's